Today, we're going to connect the dots between three global crises that, on the surface, seem totally unrelated. We're talking Washington, the Middle East, South America. It really looks like the very foundations of world power are being tested. So let's dive in and see what it all means.
So this is the big, provocative question, isn't it? To even begin to answer it, we have to look at these pretty unprecedented tests to American dominance. And they're coming from all sides, from the outside for sure, but maybe more surprisingly, from the inside out.
All right, here's how we're going to break this all down. We've got three case studies: a political firestorm brewing in Washington, a historic economic challenge from a key ally, and a pretty chaotic intervention down in South America. And then we'll tie it all together.
So first up, let's look at the internal fractures. There is a political crisis shaking Washington to its absolute core, and it's revealing some really deep divisions right at the top of the country's leadership.
Okay, this is not just politics as usual. You've got a group of 47 members of Congress demanding the president resign. But here's the kicker. 16 of them are from the president's own party. I mean, a break in party ranks that big is incredibly rare, and it tells you this is a crisis of the highest order.
So why the uproar? It all comes down to a leaked memo, and the allegations in it are just explosive. It claims that national defense was essentially being held hostage for campaign endorsements. We're talking about direct orders to hold up critical military operations unless generals agreed to provide political support. It's a profound and frankly shocking accusation.
And to really get how serious this is, just look at how it stacks up against other presidential scandals. Watergate, that was about political spying. The Clinton impeachment, that was about a personal affair. But these allegations, they're about using military readiness as a political pawn, which critics say puts American troops in direct danger. It's a whole different level.
This quote really captures the breaking point. It's from a Republican committee chairman, someone who's normally a staunch supporter of the administration. He reportedly read the demand for resignation on the House floor with a trembling voice. You know, when your own allies start breaking ranks like this, it's a sign that the crisis has hit a whole new level of severity.
Okay, let's shift gears. We're moving from internal turmoil to an external challenge. A challenge to the very economic pillar that has propped up American power for half a century.
So for 50 years, this thing called the petrodollar system has been the bedrock of the dollar's power. Basically, it forces every country in the world to hold US dollars so they can buy oil, and that gives the US this massive, massive economic advantage.
But now, in what is a truly monumental shift, Saudi Arabia is tearing up that 50-year-old deal. They're starting to accept China's currency, the yuan, for their oil. This is a direct, fundamental threat to that entire system.
And don't just take my word for how huge this is. The legendary investor Warren Buffett, he actually issued an emergency warning about this. He said it could cause a catastrophic drop in the value of anything based in dollars, potentially triggering the largest wealth transfer in modern history.
You know, this historical context is just crucial. It shows that challenging the dollar is a risky business. Leaders who tried this before, think Saddam Hussein in Iraq or Muammar Gaddafi in Libya, they faced swift military intervention and, well, regime change. That history makes what Saudi Arabia is doing right now even more profound.
All right, on to our third case study. This one really shows the messy, unpredictable, and often murky consequences of exercising American hard power on the world stage.
So, over in Venezuela, the U.S. justifies the pretty dramatic arrest of President Nicolás Maduro by claiming he was the leader of this massive drug cartel. But then the story changed. The Justice Department later admitted that this Cartel of the Suns, well, it wasn't a real organization. They said it was just a metaphor for corruption.
So what really happened? Well, a lot of sources suggest the raid only worked because of a high-level betrayal. The evidence seems to point to Vice President Delcy Rodriguez, who supposedly met with U.S. intelligence right before it all went down. I mean, the details, from the very specific casualties to the fact that their best defenses were never even used, it all points to a possible inside job.
Political analyst John Mearsheimer has this really interesting take on her rise to power. He basically says it's not a simple succession, it's what happens when a system is under intense pressure. In his view, these hard states always elevate their most disciplined, most resilient operators, the people who can handle a crisis.
So on one hand, you have this calculated, strategic power play unfolding in Venezuela. And on the other hand, you have a very different face of American power on display. We're talking about total chaos erupting in a federal courtroom.
I mean, this sequence of events is just almost unbelievable. The president's own legal team gets physically thrown out of court.
First, they falsely accuse the prosecution of faking evidence. Then they get proven wrong on the spot. But instead of backing down, they double down and defy a direct order from the judge. It ends with federal marshals escorting them out. You just don't see that kind of drama in a federal court.
Okay, so a domestic political scandal, a huge economic pivot, and a messy foreign intervention. How in the world do these three completely separate stories connect?
Well, the key here is that they're not isolated incidents. You can think of them as attacks on American power from three totally different directions. You've got the internal political decay, the external economic challenge, and the chaotic reality of trying to project power abroad.
Each one of these stories is a big deal on its own, right? But when you put them all together, a pattern starts to emerge. They become data points that suggest a bigger shift is happening, a move away from a world with one clear superpower towards something new, and honestly, a lot more unpredictable.
And all of this leads us to one final, really critical question. If the old order is fraying, if the pillars of power are starting to wobble, we have to ask, what new system is being built to replace it? And maybe more importantly, who is going to be at the center of it?